Good morning, campers. This is a video during the Camp NaNoWriMo session of 2018 July. I'm sure that if for some reason you are actually watching my videos, you are getting a little sick of just seeing videos where it's updates about my word count. I can imagine those must be rather dull. I wanted to give a quick video about my outlining process, kind of in celebration of the fact that I finished my outlining for my current manuscript yesterday. Finally, I got to the last chapter and I was so thrilled that it was over. Well, I mean, it's not over, but I mean that I got through that part because I had never done outlining before. Actually, I've never written a novel before. The most I've done was like short stories in elementary school, which tells you how long ago that was. And I did essays in high school, but I didn't really do much in the way of creative writing in high school. And I think the longest thing before this that I've ever written was about, I want to say about 4,000 or 5,000 words max. So this has been a really big project for me to take on. And I first started off by trying to just write it from what I had in my head. And I quickly realized that that was not working. I was running into all sorts of problems. So then I tried to outline around what I had already written the first time. And I ended up catching myself putting in a bunch of back and forth chapters between locations that weren't necessary. I realized I was going in the wrong direction with my plot, so I had to do some brainstorming and figure out what I needed to actually do. At that point, I had already outlined like 5 chapters, and when I say outlined, I mean did like a 500 to 600 word summary of what was going to be in the chapter. So when I realized that I had like 5 chapters that turned out to be completely useless because they weren't going in the right direction, I had to scrap them, which was almost me scrapping as much as the largest thing I'd ever written before taking on this project. So that was a little bit, it was a little tough because I kept trying to make it work and come up with another chapter, but then I kept going back and forth in these kind of like non-committal things that my characters were doing. And I'm like, nope, gotta just say this isn't working. We're gonna go back to where we were. I actually had about 5 chapters already written, like completely written with this, though not necessarily in order because I decided to add perspectives from different characters. So I basically had chapter 1, chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter like 7 and 8 written. And then there were like ones in between that I hadn't actually written yet that were from different people's perspectives. I decided shortly after scrapping my other chapter outlines that I wanted to write those other perspectives. Partially because I was just finding it hard to tell the story without using those other people's perspectives, and partially because I realized if I'm only doing these 2 people's perspectives in it, that I was just really limited in what things I could use unless I wanted to switch to doing third person omniscient, and I didn't want to do that. So it just seems awkward to me, and as much as I like Robert A. Heinlein and several other authors who write third person omniscient a lot, it doesn't suit me. My voice doesn't come out very well when I've tried it. So I'm sticking to third person limited. And the best way for me to do that and get all the parts of the story in that need to be there is to do several different people's perspectives. I'm doing at least 4 people, possibly 5. It depends on if I want to do the other person's perspective. I would love to because I think they're a really interesting character. However, I can tell that I wouldn't have very many chapters that I'd write in their perspective, and it would seem rather unbalanced and almost better to just leave them out altogether as far as doing their perspective. So anyway, back on the farm here. How I do my outlining. So I can only tell you how I do my outlining to the extent of how I am doing my outlining currently, since I had never done outlining until very, very recently, when I realized that this was not working. I have, however, started the beginning part of my outlining process for several other stories. There's a Western that I'm setting up for real NaNoWriMo that I want to do that's probably going to be more like a novella, because it's kind of straightforward. There's not a ton of subplots or any of that jazz, but it's a Western. You know what? It's just going to be straightforward. I love old spaghetti Westerns, and the whole shoot 'em up, paint the town red scenes are fun. So I wanted to do a Western. I'm not going to dive too much into that because we're talking about my outlining process, but I've got most of the outlining done for that as well. And then I've got the beginning stages of outlining done for 2 other stories that are kind of in the baby stage right now. But what I do now that I realize that I have to outline is I start linearly, I can't say that word, linearly, there we go. I work in, well, I wouldn't say chronological order, but I write the chapters out. Like, I put the chapters by number, and then I write in the main plot point of each chapter, not necessarily in chronological order, more like just in the order that I imagine the story happening, because to me, especially in my current manuscript, it's not necessarily in order chronologically to this sequence of events. Like the first 4 chapters are done at a certain time, but then it jumps back to about 2 weeks earlier from the other person's perspective. So it's not really in order in that sense, but it's in the order in which I see the story unfolding, if like it was a movie, for example. So I go through in each chapter and I put the major plot point for each chapter so that I know what main event is going to happen in each one. Just in like 1 to 2 sentences I put that. Then once I'm done with that, I go through, and for each chapter that I have a plot point, I do a summary, several paragraphs, usually about 500, 600 words. My last chapter that I did on this current one, though, ended up almost being 800 words. It's a little bit of a longer summary because I got really into it. And I got a little emotional during it. But that's my second phase. And then what I do, or what I am currently doing, is, well, actually I've kind of done this along the way on this one, but on the next ones I've decided I'm going to add a third step in here between that and actually moving on to drafting the actual chapter. What I kind of did during the writing of the summaries is when I'd realize there was a problem or a mistake or something that was going to need editing later, or research, or this, that, or the other thing, I would literally put in like, oh my gosh, parentheses, and I would do, I'm not even kidding, just stream of consciousness, like note-taking, where, I'm not kidding, one of my characters gets an injury, and I literally wrote, need to research medical procedures for compound fractures, how crushed limbs would be treated in a situation where you don't have an actual hospital. Think about rewriting this scene in a different place in the book, because if I do it here, I've got to write this character the entire book with this injury, and it's going to be a pain, and it makes it hard to write certain scenes. Also consider writing it a little bit differently. This seems a little bit too much like this other scene in this other movie, and it's bothering me. And then, like, in parentheses. So those are kind of editing notes, and what I do is for stream of consciousness ones where it's just kind of it's supposed to be a mental note, but I'm writing it down because otherwise I'll forget. I will put it in green. If it's something that's specifically saying I need to research a particular topic later, I will highlight it in blue. If it's something that is just like, I know this is going to cause problems and I need editing later, but right now I can't figure out how to deal with it, I will do it in red, which is stuff that basically I need to brainstorm about later. And then I have other color coding stuff that I do too, but not at this stage. Those are the 3 colors I use for when I've got basically kind of editing notes inserted into the outlining stage. In the future, I'm going to make that a whole different stage. I'm going to do the normal outline, and then on the side in Scrivener, put those in the little notes section. It's just I don't like reading from that tiny little post-it note. I'd have to like stretch it over and make it bigger. But though that's where I start off, and that's how I get my outlining done. Then I move on to actually drafting the chapter. Now I am a severe underwriter. It's bad. The first time I draft a chapter, I'm usually at about 1,000 words. And then by the time I go back in and add a bunch of details and junk, I'm usually anywhere between about 2,500 words to like 5,000, depending on how undetailed I was in the first draft of the chapter. I usually go through, and I found that what I do is I get through one whole chapter where I do the underwriting that I just do naturally, and then I will go back and do the same chapter and add some details, and then add some details again, add some details again, until it actually seems like a real chapter. I do kind of edit as I go for the most part. I'm not going to be doing that so much for this Camp NaNoWriMo. I'm just trying to get through it, and then I will focus on going back through next month and do that. So it is kind of out of order for me to be doing it without editing as I go, and it's kind of disconcerting. I'm not wild about it, but it is forcing me to get quite a few more words on the page than I normally would, which is good. So that's pretty much my outlining process. This was a pretty long video. I got off track a few times, so please forgive me. I'm not trying to make excuses, but it's a little harder to make a well formatted video that stays on topic when you're driving and you're constantly distracted. So in the future, I may focus more on doing like actually edited videos and things that are a little bit more scripted, but for now I just don't care. So hopefully you don't care either and you get something out of this, instead of thinking I'm just a crazy person who's rambling forever. Anyway, I'm gonna let you all go, get back to your writing for Camp Nano, and y'all have a great day and happy writing. All right, bye.